us all. And not always under the cover of darkness. Sometimes it's on a sparkling Thursday afternoon, like the shadow of a hand passing over water, when we least expect it. It will be a long time before I forget the almond green of his eyes and the glassy look in them as he stared at me through the 2 inches of water that separated us. He was unable to lift his head or even grab with purpose towards the paddle that I extended to him, and as I dragged him towards the boat, he was babbling as I was speaking to him about remaining calm so that he didn't put us both in danger, but I needn't have worried because he didn't have the strength. 30 minutes before, I'd been sitting on the patio of El Paradiso on Laguna de Apoyo in central Nicaragua, talking to my friend Rosa, and we watched his kayak flip about a half a kilometer offshore. We laughed as we watched because we thought it was a friend of ours who had insisted on taking a boat out in spite of our warnings against the high waves, and I said to Rosa, don't worry, as long as he hasn't lost his paddle, he's going to be fine. And so we watched, and pretty soon we saw his paddle flash in the sun. We went back to our conversation, but I kept one eye on the water. And we saw him struggling with the boat. We saw it flip. I saw his feet come up into the air. Almost there. Trying to get back onto the boat. Over he went. The kayak flipped again. I said to Rosa, all right, he's got 2 minutes, and then I'm going to have to paddle out there and get him. We watched him continue to struggle. He flipped the kayak. He got back on it. He almost had it, and then we watched the kayak float away. I leapt for the beach. And I will spare you the details of stealing a kayak, paddling 5 years off of my life, trying to keep my eye on his head every time the waves lifted us both so that I could see him, hoping that he would still be there when I got there. I'll spare you the details of the difficulty of dragging a body much bigger than your own onto a kayak in waves like that. And as I struggled to keep my boat perpendicular to the waves, using my dad's excellent one-arm paddle technique, holding the kid by his elbow with my foot on the front of the boat, it occurred to me that the only thing worse than dragging a 9/10 dead boy ashore is dragging an actually dead boy ashore. He recovered physically in a few hours. The blood blisters that were under all of my rings from the hard paddle, they passed. But what didn't pass was the trauma for both of us. We were scarred in that day together, but we were also bonded. And in the days that followed, I got a lot of feedback from people, email from people all over the world, and some of them sent me encouragement saying, hey, you know, great that you were there. Others sent me hate mail. Some people called me a fool for risking my life for someone that I didn't even know. But the thing about Brian Reyes Ron, age 24, from Esatlan, Mexico, raised in Los Angeles, software developer, one of 4 siblings, is that he was not a stranger. He's my son. He was my son before I pulled him back through that thin veil of water that sometimes separates the living from the dead. And although another woman gave him life the first time, my hands gave it back to him. And in that moment, we became family in a way that can't be separated. And he knows, I hope he's watching today, he knows that he's here with me today. And he's given me permission to share his story with you. And if there's one thing that I have learned in 10 years of full-time travel with my family of 4 children and my husband, is that there are no strangers on this planet. There are only friends and family that we haven't met yet. And when one begins to look at the world through those eyes and the humans who populate it that way, what we find is that we're looking at the people we love most in the world, and compassion is kindled. I suppose there are a lot of ways to generate compassion in this life, but I don't know of any simpler ones than travel. There have been so many things that we have not needed to teach our children simply because we spent an afternoon at Buchenwald, or we walked for a day through the killing fields of Cambodia. And then there's the long parade of dinner table guests that we've had. Everyone from drug addicts to Israeli fighter pilots to inspired musicians who use their time and money to buy blue paint for children in Honduras, to Mennonites that build windmills on the Great Plains and sometimes in Africa. There have been adventurers and missionaries, students, shamans, hitchhikers, the old and wizened and toothless, and the young kids who play soccer in our garden when we live in Guatemala. There was Manya, the bread lady who lived below us in Tunisia, orphans, and a genuine knight of the realm. All of these people have become our hitchhikers, have become our teachers, and our family over the years. Through their experiences, we've learned how to frame our own, and through seeing the world through their eyes, we continue to grow in compassion. So we all have a sense of what compassion means. It's this deep sympathy and connection that we have with another person. It allows us to feel what they feel, and it allows us to be spurred to action, usually to alleviate suffering in some way, right? But what I find interesting is the antonym. Do you know what the antonym of compassion is? It's indifference. And indifference is defined as a lack of interest or concern. Now, it's obvious to me why travel builds compassion, because it opens your eyes to things you haven't seen yet. It causes you to ask questions about things that you encounter that you just don't understand. And it kindles an interest in people and places and ways of life that are totally different from anything that you've experienced at home. But from that interest grows a concern for the people and places and cultures, and that is the seed of compassion. But indifference is easier, isn't it? If we stay home, if we stick our heads in the sand, it becomes very easy to reduce the world to us versus them. It becomes easy to see things from only one perspective. We can convince ourselves that the things that we can't control aren't really our problem. It's very easy to surrender to indifference, the reality that thousands of people are dying in India right now from the worst flooding that they've had in hundreds of years, that Mexico City is in shambles because of a devastating earthquake, or that the genocide in Guatemala was perpetrated using our tax dollars, or that entire island nations have been swept away in hurricanes this fall, or that there are cities full of refugees, individual people and families who live without home and without country year after year after year. If you travel long enough, indifference is a luxury that you are no longer afforded. At the root of compassion is courage. And I would argue that compassion as an emotion without the iron-willed fire of courage is useless. Once we've conquered the indifference in our lives, the point at which everyday heroism becomes part of our life is in our commitment to live a life of courage on behalf of those that are weaker than we are. So heroism as a way of life requires two things. It requires commitment, and it requires equipping. If you're at this conference, you've already been inspired by a lot of the speakers that are here. There are many more to come. That's the first step, the inspiration. Then comes the commitment. You can choose heroic compassion over cowardly indifference every morning, but that commitment is going to cost you. It's going to cost you financially. Prepare to spend thousands of dollars you haven't figured out how to raise yet on feeding, clothing, educating, empowering people that you have not met yet. It's going to cost you in time. Whatever you work now, add 30% for philanthropy and for empowerment of other people, and don't expect any thanks for it. It'll cost you emotionally. My heart's been broken on all continents. I've spent nights worrying and weeping with people that I don't share a language with. And you can prepare to wade heart deep into people's lives and face your own inadequacy in a way that you never have before. Everyday heroism also requires equipping yourself. It's not enough to just have a commitment without tools to address the task. So for some of you, that's going to mean getting your finances figured out, so that when you meet a Cambodian man with 30 orphan children living with him and you say, what can I do to help? And he says, well, this one needs to go to college, but we can't figure out how we're going to pay for that. Picking up that $400 a year bill becomes a no-brainer. For others, you're going to need to make your bodies fit so that when the time comes, you can carry another human being to safety. For other people, it might require equipping your mind so that you can make rational, clear-headed, data-driven decisions and stop being blown by the winds of propaganda and fear. You'll need to build your skill set so that you're ready to give first aid to somebody, to rescue a drowning man, to revive a child who isn't breathing, to build a crowdfunding campaign, like Mallory did this morning, to put together a conference like Matt has done here, to find ways to move hearts. Everyday heroism, lifestyle heroism, is not a one-off thing. It results from a deep commitment to the continual equipping of yourself to be the bottom line. Everyday heroes are people who dare to live their lives fully and courageously. They're people who live lives full of optimism and joy because they believe that the world can be changed one life at a time. And sometimes living with joy is a heroic act in and of itself. The morning after Brian's brush with death, he sat on the beach and he watched the sun rise on the first day of the rest of his life, and he told me that he made a commitment that day to fully live his life and to do things with his life that mattered. He committed to living a heroic existence with the days that he had left. And this is the beginning of everyday heroism. A month ago, I was with my brother, who's a hero in and of his own right. And I found a poem laying on his kitchen table, and that poem is what I would like to end with today. It's called The Invitation, and it's written by Oriah Mountain Dreamer, who's a native elder. And it goes like this. I'm not interested in what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for, and whether you dare to dream of meeting your own heart's longing. I'm not interested in how old you are. I want to know if you'll risk being a fool for love, for your dream, for the adventure of being alive. I'm not interested in what planets square your moon. I want to know if you've touched the center of your own sorrow, if you've been opened by life's betrayals, or whether you've been shriveled and closed for fear of further pain, mine or yours. I want to know if you can sit with that pain, mine or yours, and then dance with wildness, filled to the ends of your fingers and toes with ecstasy, without cautioning me to be careful, to be more realistic, to remember the limitations of being human. I'm not interested in whether the story you're telling me is true. I want to know if you can see beauty, even when it's not pretty every day. And I want to know if you can source your life only from God's presence. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours or mine, and still stand on the shore of the lake and shout to the silver of the full moon, yes! I'm not interested in where you live or how much money you make. I want to know if you can get up after a night of grief and despair, weary and bruised to the bone, and do what needs to be done for the children. I'm not interested in what or with whom you have studied. I want to know what sustains you when all else falls away. I want to know whether you can be alone and whether you truly like the company you keep in those moments. I'm not interested in who you are or how you are here. I want to know if you will stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. Thank you.
The Hero Roundtables are the global events that ask the question, what is a hero? You've just seen one hero talk. To find more and join the conversation, visit our website or social media.